Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Sam, and in today's video it's time to do my July monthly wrap-up. Part of me can't believe that July is over, and another part of me feels like July was the longest month ever. I feel like I've lived 3 lives in this month, but nonetheless, we are here at the end. I am filming this about a week early because it's the only time I have to film. I'm not sure what happened, but the last couple months I haven't been able to get everything that I've read within the month in the video, but I'm hoping to add some clips at the end of the remaining books that I read in the last week. But I'm going to talk at least about the 8 books that I have read so far. I have a feeling that I'll be able to read at least 4 more books. I'm almost finished 2, in the middle of another one, so I feel like I'll be able to read at least 4 more. But anyway, let's talk about the books that I have read. Really quick, one book that I ended up reading in June that just didn't get into my last wrap up, and that was Betting on You by Lynn Painter. I'm pretty sure I rated this 3 stars. It was cute and fun, but not really my favorite. I felt like I couldn't really relate to either of our main characters, and Bailey was pretty whiny and annoying. In this book, we're following Bailey, who her parents have recently separated, and she's kind of going through that change in her life where her parents are no longer together and they're starting to date other people, and she's sort of living in this in-between state of parents who are living in 2 different states. She meets our male main character on a flight and keeps bumping into him. And this book was just really annoying to me because all of our characters, like everyone in this book, just needed to have a single conversation with each other. Like her and her mom should have just had like a normal conversation. It was all just handled really weird, and as someone who's from a divorced family, like, yeah, I have experience with this like weird sort of in between, but she has a good relationship with both of her parents, and the fact that there was no communication happening on either side was just strange. So it was cute, but it wasn't my favorite. It was a little annoying, but that was the end of June. So for July, the first book that I read is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I ended up rating this 4 stars. This was fun and cute, but nothing like super special or revolutionary. So this book follows Alex and Poppy, who have been friends for a number of years and go on a summer trip together, and sort of, goes from there. It's a romance book on what's going to happen. It was definitely an easy read. I feel like I flew through it. It was really cute, but I just wasn't super invested in our characters or their lives. You could tell that both of our characters love each other so much, just the different situations that they found themselves in and the acts of service that they would do for each other. Like I said, I feel like it's been 3 lifetimes that I have been in July, so I honestly couldn't even tell you much about what happened in this book. I mean, that's also a sign that I definitely enjoy my time reading it, but it's not a book that is going to stick with me. The next book that I read was Pucking Ever After Volume 2 by Emily Rath. This is the second novella in the Jacksonville Rays series. I ended up rating this one 3 stars. All of these novellas that Emily Rath puts out in this series is a collection of bonus chapters. So these bonus chapters could be from the middle of book 1, the middle of book 2. It could be an extended epilogue. Since we're so far into the series at this point, it's hard to remember what else was happening in book 1 if there's bonus chapters happening. I found a lot of these chapters to be really heavy, so definitely check the trigger warnings of these ones. There's a lot of medical situations. And with this being just a collection of bonus chapters, but also like they're short stories, some of them are incredibly long and there's no real chapter breaks. So I think some of these were like 50 pages long and it followed the whole story of whatever was happening, but there was no easy stopping point. You kind of just had to sit and read the whole 50 pages. So that was a little bit frustrating. But I feel like I enjoyed the relationships in this one more. I found that our relationship that was from book 1 sort of went in a direction that didn't feel like the same characters as in book 1 in the first novella. But I feel like in this one we got to see more of those characters as they actually are and as I remembered them from book 1. So I definitely did enjoy that part. This one also gets really, really spicy, so keep that in mind. But this was a lot of fun and I definitely wanted to make sure I read it before book 3 comes out. which comes out later this year. I think I'm not 100% sure when, but I'm very excited for that one. The next book that I read this month is Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. This is book 2 in the Shepherd King duology, and I ended up rating this one 5 stars. This was so good. I will say with this one, when I finished it, I didn't necessarily get that typical 5-star feeling, but just the way that this duology and this book was written and put together and everything came together and revealed at the end. I finished it and I was like, I can't rate this anything less than 5 stars. This was so good. In this series, we're following Elsbeth, who has a secret that she has been hiding her entire life, and she lives in this world that magic is banned except for the use of these providence cards. And there's a forest of mist that if you get caught in, you are given magical powers that are banned. And Elspeth joins forces with some other characters to try to help get rid of this mist. I think that's the easiest I have ever summarized the plot of this duology, because I find there's so many layers. It's very difficult to explain, but when you're reading it, the way that Rachel Gillig has written this duology, you get little bits and pieces of the plot and the history that ends up coming together so effortlessly and is not difficult to understand when you're reading at all. I would highly recommend this duology. We get some additional POVs in this one. Just everything was so thought out, and the twists and the turns that you get in this one, the relationships that are formed, is fantastic. I definitely want to reread these in the fall time to really lean into that spooky gothic fantasy setting. But if you haven't picked these up yet, I would highly recommend. The next book I read is The Finish Line by Kate Stewart. This is book 3 in the Ravenhood trilogy. I ended up rating this one 4 stars. This definitely feels like an extended epilogue, but it was really needed, and I'm really glad that this was written the way that it was. We get a lot of answers and backstory as to why things happened the way that they happened. I definitely don't want to give too much away because the series is just not what I expected it to be at all. It's one of those series where as I was reading it, I didn't know how much I really cared about the characters or what was going on, and you get to, I don't know, like the 70% mark, and I'm like, oh, just kidding. I actually really care about what happens to these characters. I'm thinking about these characters all the time. But as I've said in every single video that I talk about this book, I think it's going to be even better on reread, and I can't wait to read them again already. I feel like I'm going to pick up on so many little crumbs that are left in the first 2 books that obviously you don't pick up because you don't know everything. The only way I can really describe this is like a dark contemporary romance, which has nods to Robin Hood. That's all I'm going to give you. But definitely check trigger warnings and go in as blind as you can. The next book that I read was The Order of Scorpions by Ivy Asher, and I ended up doing a buddy read of this with Emily, and I rated this 3 stars. The beginning of this book was fantastic. I was so excited to continue reading this book. We're following our main character who wakes up in this cage and has no idea how she got there, has no memory of her past, and ends up training in this like assassin training camp. The story just kind of goes from there. I don't want to give too much away because there's kind of a lot of things that happen in this, but at the same time, around the 30-40% mark, this book got so slow, and I feel like our characters were just reiterating the same messaging and the same conversations and the same thoughts over and over and over again. And I feel like if this was just going to be one book, like a solid 100 pages could have been taken out of it. But then it starts to pick up more at the end. It was just very predictable to me. But at the end, we did have some more twists and reveals and some answers. And I feel like if this was made into a duology instead, there could have been a lot more time to explore the actual answer that we got instead of just having this long, drawn out middle part and then wrapping everything up within like 50 pages. And I really expected this to be like a dark fantasy spicy time, and it wasn't really giving that. So unfortunately, this was only 3 stars. The next book that I read was Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. Unfortunately, this was also a 3-star read for me. I was really excited to get into this book because I know that a lot of people consider this to be their favorite romance of all time. And I wanted in on that club, and this just did not hit for me. I feel like it was written very young, even though our main characters were both in their mid-20s, and so the writing was very juvenile. The use of tummy over and over again made me really uncomfortable, and I feel like it gave a lot of I can fix him vibes, which definitely is not the purpose or the intent. In this book, we're following Bree and Archer, who both have a very traumatic and troubled past, and they meet in this small town and get to know each other, become friends, and go on to more. And it was definitely cute, but just didn't live up to what I was expecting this to be, unfortunately. There's also a lot of plot points that were thrown in sort of for shock value or to move the plot forward because it was like never touched on again. I don't know. The very end really bothered me as well. So yeah, unfortunately, this is not my favorite, but I'm definitely intrigued to read more in this like interconnected series. Next book that I read was Gothicana by Rune X. Again, this was another 3-star for me. I was looking forward to this one, but I think that I've heard pretty mixed reviews when this first came out. Again, I was expecting this to be a really dark, twisty romance. This is described as a Beauty and the Beast meets Dracula retelling, and this definitely gives like the spooky gothic academia vibes. We're following Corvina, who is invited to this secret high school that you can only get in by invitation only, very small, but it's supposed to be haunted. So there's lots of weird things happening at this school, and you're trying to figure out if it's ghosts, if there's like weird things actually happening, if the school is affecting students' minds, or if that's just who they are. And I found the first half of this book to be pretty slow. I wasn't really following necessarily everything that was going on, but the second half definitely picked up. We were starting to get more answers and more reasonings as to what was happening, what was going on, and the relationship sort of got better to me. This was one of those books that was a fun time while I was reading, but nothing special or that I was going to think about for a long time. And the last book that I have read, at least at this point in the month, is Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. This is a sci-fi first book in a series. I ended up rating this 4 stars. I had a great time. This book is set in a time when something has happened to give certain people abilities, and these people are called epics, and they have started ruling over the different cities and states because they have these powers and they can control people and cause destruction. So we're following David, who has made it his life's mission to take out one of these epics. And this was just so much fun. I mean, this was published in 2013, so definitely gave those mid-2010s sci-fi dystopian vibes. Lots of twists and turns, and reminded me a lot of I Am Number 4, which is a huge series by Pittacus Lore that I started reading at that point, but ended up, I think I reread them all in 2020. So this definitely gave similar vibes. It was just so much fun. I cannot wait to read book 2. Very glad that I have started my Brandon Sanderson journey. Hi, Future Sam, jumping in to chat about the last 6 books that I read in the month of July. Starting out, we have Crossed by Emily McIntyre. This is the 5th book in the Never After novels. This has really been a hit or miss series for me, which I have been buddy reading with my bookish bestie Emily, who will be linked down below as per usual. For some reason, I just had a really good feeling about this one, and although I didn't go in with high expectations, I still expected that I was going to like this one, if that makes any sense. And I'm so glad that my intuition, my gut feeling was right. I ended up rating this 4.5 stars. I had a great time. I feel like this one is the darkest of the books in this series, in my opinion. It's very twisted and gory. I don't know if it would be considered taboo, but it's very like questionable morals sort of situation. So this is a Hunchback of Notre Dame retelling. We're following Amaya and Cade. So Amaya is the Esmeralda of the story. She has a really crappy family history and everyone considers her almost like a bad omen. People are convinced that she's a witch, but really she's just trying to look out for her younger brother. And we're also following Cade, which I don't remember what his name is in like the original story, but he's the priest of the cathedral. And Cade is sort of working through his own demons and traumas from his childhood and working through like moral dilemmas. I found that this plot had a lot of layers, there was twists and turns. I really didn't know how our main characters were going to end up together. Like I was kept on the edge of my seat and the tension was just so good. Highly recommend reading like this book alone. Most of the other books in the series did not hit for me, but this one was fantastic. I had a phenomenal time. The next book that I read was actually an audiobook, and I've only been an audiobook reader for a little while, and it's a lot of fun to have like 1 or 2 audiobooks per month for me that I can listen to on my way to and from the office. The one that I read in July was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This was actually recommended to me by one of my personal friends last year for my 12 book challenge, and I really thought that this was just going to be a really cute, fun, witchy apothecary sort of story, which at times it definitely was, but there was a lot more layers and depth and darkness to this book, and I had a really good time. I ended up rating this 4 stars. We're following a multiple POV dual timeline situation. So we're following Nella, who is an apothecary in 1790, and she really only sells to women and specializes in women who have been wronged by their husbands or other men in their life. And we're also following Caroline, who is in present day and has taken a trip to London after she finds out something about her husband of 10 years. I think that's all I'm gonna say. The way that these stories were connected, the mystery and intrigue of it all, it was so entertaining, and the narrators did a phenomenal job. There was 3 separate narrators, I believe, and they all gave very individual characters to each of the characters in this book, so it was very easy to follow whose POV it was and what was going on, especially not being able to focus 100% of my time listening as I was driving. So I really appreciated that it was really easy to follow and understand, and I was smiling and giggling and gasping the whole time. I would highly recommend. I think this was like I said, it was super fun, but it definitely has darker themes, so I would recommend checking the trigger warnings. As with any of these books, I definitely had a darker reading month. The next book that I read was Honey by Marielle Pomeroy. This is the second book to Hellfire. Now, I definitely did myself a disservice. I guess I did read Hellfire quite a long time ago, so I didn't really remember what was going on. And honestly, I didn't fully remember or understand what was going on as I was reading that book. It definitely hindered my potential enjoyment of this book, but I did end up rating this 3 stars. I found the plot really confusing. We had multiple POVs, but there was additional POVs that were thrown in just as one chapter that felt entirely out of place, didn't make sense to the story and what was happening. I have a feeling that they might come into play in book 3, but I honestly don't think I'm going to continue. I just really don't care about what was happening or about any of our characters. Like, I had a fine enough time when I was reading it, but I didn't care. I was kind of reading it just to read it and be finished with it. It wasn't something that I was looking forward to pick up because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. The next book that I picked up and read was Powerful by Lauren Roberts. This is the novella that comes after Powerless. I ended up rating this 4 stars. I thought this was really cute and fairly well done for being such a short novella. In this book, we're following Adina, who is Peyton's best friend, and it takes place on the same timeline as Powerless, but obviously following different characters. This is really cute, very emotional, with our characters' backstories and what they're going through, but I still was left wanting more. I understand that it was a novella, but I've definitely read some phenomenal novellas that have a fully fleshed out story and the pacing makes it easy to understand. And I found that this one was a little bit choppy. You could definitely tell that there was time jumps. And I wish that we got a little bit more description or explanation about certain things, even if it was just an extra line or two. It really didn't need to be like 50 more pages or something. And I've definitely heard people say that they could read a 400-page book, and I could definitely say the same, but I think it's more because I felt like it wasn't all explained well, if that makes sense. It just felt a little choppy. Like I said, this follows the exact same timeline as Powerless, so if you know how Powerless goes, I had an even bigger reaction to this book, which was kind of surprising to me. The next book that I read was Savage Lover by Sophie Lark. This is book 3 in the Brutal Birthright series. I enjoyed this. I ended up rating it 3.5 stars. It wasn't anything that I think is going to stick with me, but I could not put this book down. I just wanted to keep reading and reading and reading and find out what happened. I actually really enjoyed the large inclusion of the car and mechanic sort of talk. I thought that was really interesting and something that I hadn't really read before. I also really liked both of our main characters. I felt like they were very distinct and they had very interesting plot lines that obviously interwove together. I feel like the relationship came out of nowhere. Both of our main characters were kind of on their own path and kept interweaving, but there was no really thought process or conversation between them that led them to be in a relationship. It was just one chapter. One of the characters was like, yeah, I think I love them. I'm like, since when? Why? You guys have barely interacted. The series overall is like a mafia romance series where we have 2 mafia families that end up joining together in the first book, and each subsequent book we're following a different sibling from each family. So this was Nero Gallo's story. Like I said, it was fun. It wasn't anything super deep. Had some good twists. I had a good time. I would definitely recommend this series as like an introduction to mafia romances, or just if you're looking for a super quick read. I think they're a lot of fun. Like I said, they're not anything phenomenal, but I think they're a good time. And the last book that I read is Twisted Heathens by J. Rose. This is the first book in the Blackwood Institute series, and I honestly don't know how to talk about this book. I ended up rating it 3.5 stars, and this is by far the darkest book that I have read. I had a great time reading it. It was very entertaining and kind of felt like a trashy TV series where I couldn't stop. I just wanted to know what was going on. In the series, we're following a group of people who are in their like early 20s, and they're all inmates for one thing or another, but they all have very severe mental illness. And so this book talks a lot about mental illness and the way that their thought process is working and sort of what's going through their head on like the most severe standpoint. And so this Blackwood Institute is supposed to be somewhere where these people can come and get therapy and get medication if needed so that they can try and go back into their normal life. So this gets very dark. There's a laundry list of trigger warnings, so I would highly, highly recommend reading them before going into this because it's very graphic and gruesome and dark and twisty, but it was very interesting in being able to read about these perspectives that I fortunately don't have experience with. So the writing was definitely easy to read, but the content in this book was not easy to read. But overall, I had an enjoyable time reading this because I was getting connected to these characters and wanted to know what was happening and want the best for them. So that's how I wrapped out my month. So I'm going to send it back to past Sam to wrap up this video. So those are all of the books that I have read in the month of July. Let me know down below if you have read any of these books or what your favorite book from the month was. I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.